Butler, friend. It's good to see you again on Living Corporate. We talk fairly often, but see you here. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
You know, I'm okay. The world is like really crazy. I feel like every time I do a pod, like real talk, and I mean, we're podding all the time over here. I feel like I'm saying that a lot.
Mhm.
I've been saying that I've been saying that every year of the 6 years Living Corporate has been around. Like, oh, the world's pretty crazy, but I'm okay. Um, Look, I want to get right into it because I find you interesting. And for those who don't know you, I mean, like, I'll really quickly. I'm gonna get right to it. HR executive, author, speaker, consultant, thought leader, workout enthusiast, overall dope, good, fun time. Madison Butler. Uh, I I find you interesting because like we're in this age um of like just content, right? Like frankly, content oversaturation. There's too much content. And the way these tech companies have been built, it's like everybody has this like obligation to basically be their own content machine to get seen for other people. So like everybody now is like a little content creator, even people who don't really call themselves content creators. We've all been kind of funneled into this system to just create content. And what's interesting about you, I found since we've met several years ago, is your brand is like your digital footprint. It's like a content creator's, but you're not really like a content creator like that in terms of like you're not just sitting around just like that's just not like you're really a whole HR executive. Um, and yet like you figured out a way through your content to generate incredible engagement. And I'm curious as to like where does that come from? Like, do you feel like you just kind of just go viral just on accident on LinkedIn every time you post? Is there some type of science to it? Like, are you just kind of like writing what's top of mind? Like, what is that? What is that? Because every time you post, I'm like, man, it's like every time I know it's going to get 10,000 likes, a million comments. Like, what is that about?
It's all accidental. Like, I don't really think I have a science. I'll say the only thing that I feel like I do consistently is I do tend to post around the same time of day. Very rarely do you like see my content in the late afternoon or evening. I tend to post in late morning for no other reason than that's usually what I'm like, oh, LinkedIn exists. So for me, it's never been like, oh God, I have to go out and create content. It's like, if I have something to say, I say it. If I don't have something to say, I don't say it. And kind of the same with TikTok. Like I can go months without posting on TikTok. And then one day I'll just be like, I have a thought. I'm going to say it on video. And I might do that for a couple of days and play off the same video, but I don't have any like true calendar or strategy. I never want to be seen as someone who creates content for the sake of creating content, because I think that puts you in a very dangerous territory as someone whose content is solely around education. Like my content is meant to educate, not to entertain. And so when you're pushing content so frequently because you feel like you have to, I think you lose not only the authenticity in your content, I think you start to just follow the trends. And it is impossible as any individual to be well-versed and well-educated on every single thing that's trending on the internet. So like I know for me, I've obviously, my content tends to center around a couple of things, but one of those things is self-love and self-care. The other one is work and like dismantling the oppressive systems that exist within corporate spaces. And then the other one is HR. Those are my lanes. Those are the lanes I've got, and those are the ones I play in. But I've had a ton of messages that have been like, you haven't said anything about Israel, or you haven't said anything about Palestine. And not because I don't have very strong opinions, but that's not my place to educate. In that space, I am too a learner. And I think it's really easy as a content creator to feel like you have to talk about everything, and you end up just putting yourself in hot water, if I'm being honest.
It's interesting you say that, like, there's this, I think around the time like of George Floyd's murder, like there was a lot of content that was kind of coming on the rise of just like, it's hard for me to describe it, Madison, as it feels like just like fist shaking. So it's like, to all the white men out there, here's how you need to unpack your privilege. And it'd be like a lot of that content. And then like, I think over time, you could kind of tell the difference between people who really are passionate and in this space and have some degree of expertise in like whatever it is they're talking about versus people who are just like writing provocative posts for engagement. Right. And to your point, I recall and I remember vividly, obviously it wasn't that long ago. It's happening. It's also actively happening right now. Rage baiting. People trying to make rage bait content out of anything. And it's just like, and I so often, Madison, like I look at this and I'm like, man, who is this for? Like, what is this serving? Like, I don't understand. Like, what are we like? What are we progressing when we write this type of content? And so I love the fact that you identify, hey, here's my lanes. I'm not going to talk about everything on these platforms because I'm still a learner. Doesn't mean I don't have a very clear personal position or individual position, but I do think it's important, right? Like, and I think there's a difference. I think there's a difference between real like rage bait content and educational content, informative content. I don't, and there are people who I've just had to like unsubscribe, unfollow, mute, whatever, because I'm not trying to like being Black in America. And yes, I benefit and participate in the patriarchy. I'm still a Black man, still Black. Being Black in America is stressful enough. I don't want to come away from your content like more stressed out or more upset. Like not on a Wednesday morning at 7. Like let me get into the day. Yeah.
I also think like if we think about it was a wild weekend, right? It was a wild weekend on the news. The stuff that people are willing to say in front of their full government names for engagement is quite literally befuddling to me. Like the things that you're like, do you want to read this in front of your boss or in front of a court of law? I had someone who made a very good point that was like, everything you say, just add your honor at the end and see how you feel about saying it. Like you can create good content without it having to be shock and awe content. And I think that's a lot of what we're seeing is we've learned over the last 4 years that shock and awe content gets you engagement, even when you're the president. And so people have followed suit. If you notice on TikTok, I think one of the most interesting things about TikTok is statistically Black women receive higher engagement if they are loud and angry in their posts, which obviously plays on a stereotype about Black women. And I have played around with that. And if I tell a really high strung, frantic type story in my content, I get way more engagement than if I just talk at a regular volume and a regular pace. And so obviously the algorithm plays to what the people want to see, and what the people want to see are stereotypical images of who we are supposed to be. Essentially, they want to see caricatures. They don't want to see the fact that no matter what identity you hold, it's not a monolith. They need you to play into that identity because that is what creates entertainment, not education.
When and where did you find the voice that you have, right? Because like, I think it's easy to like look at folks where they are today and kind of just assume, oh, they've always been like that, or they've always, they've always had these views, or they've always had this level of courage and candor. But like that isn't the case for you. Like, what was the catalyst for you to say, hey, I'm gonna just start going out here and sharing and giving my voice?
Well, so I think there's two sides, right? Like there's the like personal side and then there's the corporate side. So like my work side was obviously heavily driven by, I went viral on the internet for dating a racist. I was pretty much thrust into the media and didn't have much of a choice about it. And so that forced my hand, right, to talk about domestic violence, talk about my experience as a Black woman, to very much unpack some of the harmful things that I had incorporated into my thinking just from being with him and from living in a world that is very, very white-centered. So that there was that. But I was still carrying a lot of that to work where I was playing, politics and playing to the red tape. And for me, the catalyst was I went to an interview. This feels like a decade ago. And they were like, oh my gosh, we love you, but we need you to control your hair. That would control my hair. Take out your piercings, cover your tattoos. You have to wear a skirt or a dress. You have to wear, a heeled shoe. And I remember at the time being like, oh my God, thank you. Send me the offer, because we're so conditioned to be grateful when companies want to work with us. Mm-hmm. But on the way home, I was like white knuckling as I was driving, because I was like, how many times have organizations, have businesses, have individuals wanted to work with us because of how capable we are, but they don't care about who we are. And the reason I am so capable is because of who I am intrinsically. And so I went home and I like really angrily was like, how can I make sure that no one ever asks me to change my hair color ever again? Blah, blah, blah. And I went home and I was like, blue-haired recruiter. And that's how we ended up here, blue-haired unicorn, because obviously I had a pretty, monumental career shift. I still very much work in talent, but I'm a little bit more umbrella-y now. And so we landed on blue-haired unicorn. But for me, that was really the catalyst of, holy shit, so much of this is broken and none of us are talking about it. And so I just started writing, but I wasn't writing anything that I would consider like incredibly spicy. But, it doesn't take a whole lot for the folks on the internet to think things are spicy, because they also think salt is spicy. So I really just wrote content. People would get angry and I'd be confused. And then I worked at a company a couple years later where I had a leader who also wrote pretty spicy online content on LinkedIn. And he really pushed me to step out of my own comfort zone, to not really care what people on the internet think. And he really helped me mold how I wrote online. And so shout out Scott Leese, very grateful for him as an individual, because he was really the person who encouraged me to find my own voice online and in real life.
That's awesome. And I mean, I think that's incredible. It speaks to the intrusiveness of technology, right? Because like you're minding your own business, someone puts your personal trauma out for the world to see. That's dope that you took the time to say, I mean, and again, like if you decide not to do this, also would have been dope. But to say, you know what, I'm going to take the reins on this. I'm going to embrace who I am. I'm going to tell the truth, share my story, and then also continue to grow as a person. Like that's really cool.
Well, the thing that I think is really funny is so like I'm really open. Like if you've known me or followed my content for a long time, I'm really open about the fact that I was a shitty 20-year-old. Like I wasn't great. I harbored a ton of self-hate. I think my thoughts about Blackness were incredibly harmful, and they were rooted in self-hate that is kind of fed to us through media. I'm very honest about that. I thought I was a Republican, and that's why my hair was crispy. There's a correlation there. I'm sure of it.
And there definitely is. It was Candace Owensy.
Yes, I was not moisturizing. But the funniest thing to me is that every once in a while, I'll be writing content and someone will pop up with a screenshot from back then. And I'm like, what's weirder is that you have saved, like the last time it happened, the screenshot said posted a minute ago, but the post was from 10 years ago.
How about it was a decade ago?
Yeah, they screenshot it 10 years ago and held on to it. To make a burner account on Twitter to try and troll me. And I was like, yes, I said that 10 years ago. I actually think it's much weirder that somewhere you've got an album of the weird shit I said.
And that you on me, you on my body for real. Cause like, that was like, to your point, that was forever ago. I mean, I think what's interesting about that too, is like, I'm a firm believer that folks can change, that people can change. And I'm always going to give grace and space to Black, because man, like some of the things that I believed about myself, the things I was told and taught about myself in middle school about, okay, well, if you're quiet and you behave, you're acting white. And if you're loud, then you're acting Black. Like these are things that teachers would tell me, right? I remember I had a math teacher trying to justify slavery to me. So like all the things that we're fed, to your point, through media, through other adults, through like other adults that are supposed to be in position to teach us and educate us and guide us. Yeah, it's very likely that in your early adulthood, at 18 to 20 something range, there's a lot of things that you've learned that you're unlearning, right? I mean, golly, man, it's a decade ago.
My favorite one is people are like, when are you going to tell the internet that your mom is white? And I'm like, I don't think that's a big secret. Like, I think everyone knows. If you follow me, you know my mom is white.
Yeah. You know what's funny about that? I think the other part of what's so funny about that, there was this this self-proclaimed activist who like was on Twitter all the time, and like she always acted like she wasn't white, or that her because everyone was like, hey, you're like really light skinned, like you look white. And she just hid it for like years. She just denied it for years. And finally it came out that her mom was white. And then it was like, was so brand destroying. I think though, like to your point and who you are as a person with African team, you're just so transparent. Well, I know your mama white.
And I'm not light skinned. So like if I get pulled over by the cops, they're not like, excuse me, ma'am.
Yeah, no. Right? No.
But if you pull me over, I'm black.
Right, real talk. You look black. No, it's a fact. That's a fact. And yeah, exactly. Because like the person I'm talking to, we'll talk. I don't want to put too much heat on the pod, but like we'll talk about it off mic. But like this person is like, they're like, again, they're downright fair skinned. Like to say they're beige is like, so you know, I think, and there's also nothing wrong with being white passing, right? Like you can't. Those are just your genetics. You can't control how you were born. Mm-hmm. It's the lack of transparency, which leads me to ask, what empowers you to be so? I believe that you are probably the most, well, I'm gonna say, yeah, your public persona, and then certainly in private, like you're probably one of the most radically candid, transparent people I know. Like, where would you say that comes from?
So I think for me, it comes from a place of unpacking, wanting to be likable and wanting to truly be valued by the people I have in my life. And for the people who read my content, I want them to find value in it, not just like warm, fuzzy bullshit. And so for me, I feel like, especially like in my actual personal life, internet aside, it is really hard to determine who likes you versus who values you if you always have on some level of like facade. Like you're saying the right things and you're talking at the right tone and you're wearing the right outfits and you're laughing when you're supposed to. And, you know, overall, that's worked out really poorly for me. Trying to appease everyone else except for myself. And so in that, I've found that, you know, showing up as exactly who I am with all my stuff, because we all have stuff. Some of it's great, some of it's bad, but you are the sum of your parts, right? And in that, I have found people who really love me and think I'm cool and funny and quirky and lovely, and also know that I have tons of me that I was really anxious and nervous and all of the other stuff, and they still love me for that. And I don't have to pretend that those parts of me don't exist. Like I'm happy to be like, I'm very nervous in crowds. I don't really want to go to a concert, instead of pretending that I want to be there, you know, simply because everyone else is doing it. And so it's allowed the wrong people to kind of leave my life, which I, you know, is always hard, but in the end feels like a gift. And it has allowed companies who aren't the right fit for me to also run away from me, which rejection feels like shit, but is also a gift. It's also allowed the right people to come and stay, and I don't have to tiptoe around my words or what I'm going to say. And that for me is like the most refreshing part of life, is just getting to exist without having to rehearse what I'm going to say in my head first.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. It hasn't worked out for me well either. Like the whole, like, let me like the code switching, I don't know, we're not talking about code switching explicitly, but like just the labor of kind of trimming the ends off of yourself to fit into various slots and boxes and whatever, to appease or like kind of make other people comfortable and happy, hasn't really worked for me. And so I'd say maybe like 6 years ago, I started the work of like really being intentional with like, this is how I feel about this, or hey, here's what I believe, or hey, like, here's how I think we need to do this. And I was already doing that on the personal side, but it was on the work side of just like embracing candor, right? And people would always say, Zach, I really appreciate your candor. Like we get right to it. Like I'm not having to like decipher your words. Like, no, like I don't have the capacity for that. I don't have interest in that. Like, let's just talk about it. Hey, you said this, I don't appreciate it. This is why. Here's
Yep.
how I'd like for us to do it. Hey, so and so said this idea. They actually copied my idea and they said worse. Here's what I think we actually should do. Like
Yep.
it's a healthier way to live. And frankly, Matt, like we all gonna die. So it's kind of like, hey, I might as well just go ahead and say what it is gonna be. Cause I'm gonna die, you gonna die.
Yep.
And then like, you know, people who really know and love us and care about us, they also gonna die. And it's just not really gonna matter. So like you might as well just go ahead and say and live authentically. And I've told that to people I've said it to people so many times and like people get sad or they think it's really morbid. It's like it's not more, it should really be freeing to you that like one day like this all is gonna end. There's gonna be like this like cataclysmic heat death of the universe. Like so you might as well while you're here, just like show up as authentically as you can.
Yep.
You get one trip. Well, I believe you get one trip around this thing. So like, just go for it. Look, we've been talking about content and brand and these things. But you're also known as an expert. You're known as like, I do believe people look at you to your point. Like you've done a really good job of like, when people think of Madison, they think of blue hair. In fact, because I recommended you for something and they said, "Oh, you're talking about blue hair?" And I said,
Don't look at it right now. I need to dye real bad, but I don't really do it in the summer. It's bad for me.
No, I mean, it looks great. So you got DEI, women, wellness, HR, like those things you're known for, but like your brand is still broader than that. Like you're a technical expert. Like you're an HR executive at Grav. Talk to me about the work you're doing at Grav and like the dynamic of like the scope of your function there.
Okay. So right now my title is CXO. So essentially that means anything experience related rolls into me. So we can chalk that up to people, talent, benefits and payroll, obviously traditional HR, IT, fulfillment and distribution, partnerships, and customer success are all on my team, on my org.
That's awesome.
So fundamentally, I believe the experience that you give anyone on either side should be linear to the experience that you're giving everyone else. So the experience that you're trying to create for your employee base, it should be the experience you're trying to create for your end user. The experience you're trying to create for your end user should be modeled to look like the experience you're trying to give your employee. No one should be having a better or worse experience, and equity should be kind of the foundation of all of those things. So if we really unpack how I feel about all of these things, specifically internally, because that's, my bread and butter, I fundamentally feel like social justice and justice looks like giving people a work experience that is possible and that they deserve. I think a lot of us have modeled what we think work should be after traumatic experiences because we've been spoon-fed that work should suck. Work does not have to suck. The reason we work is because we have to. If you had to ask the majority of people, if I can give you $1 gajillion, it never ends. You're Elon Musk. Would you still go to work tomorrow? The majority of us would probably be like, no, I'm going to be butt naked on a boat somewhere. We're not at work because like fundamentally we find it to be the best thing in our lives. Even if you love your job, there are things you probably love more. We have to be there. So in having to be there, why should it be the worst part of your week? Why should it be the main topic that you're talking about in therapy? Why should it be the reason that you're on antidepressive and anti-anxiety medication? It doesn't have to be that way. And it gets worse the more marginalized your identity is. Especially as a Black person, you know that work is going to be probably a pretty big pinpoint in your trauma cycle. And so the way I view it is I want to create an experience that people hold up as like, this is the gold star experience. And every company I go to after this is exactly what I expect. Because I don't expect anyone in 2024 to come and retire with me. That is not how these generations work. That's not us. We're not getting a pension. It doesn't benefit me to be at a company for 40 years. However, it does benefit me to take that experience and then require it from who else I work for. And so essentially that's how I view work is, companies have compliance teams and legal teams. And yes, functionally, HR does work in terminations. Like there's no secret around that. However, the reason I do the work that I do is because I fundamentally feel like people need an advocate and people need someone who is thinking about their experience, their well-being, and essentially their ability to progress within their career and at a company. And so, it's funny, you and I had this conversation yesterday. Like, I think it's wildly silly to say that there's no power dynamic when you sit in this seat specifically. And people would love to say that HR doesn't have any power. Like, you are sitting in benefits conversations, you are sitting in CEO conversations, you are sitting in termination conversations, layoff conversations, hiring conversations. You are privy to a lot of information, and information is in fact power.
Yeah.
And people love to forget that. And so when I think about the work that I do, it's to try and dismantle that level of hierarchy. Like, I recognize there will always be a power dynamic. People will always get a little bit nervous when they see a calendar invite come through from me that they didn't expect. But I want to be able to create experiences that mirror what employees need, not what the company thinks they need, or the experience that keeps the company the most protected. I think the best protection you can provide your company is taking care of the people. And if you're not willing to do that, I think you are in the wrong generation of this work. I think there are two sectors of HR. There's old HR and new HR, and it is very obvious who is who when you peruse LinkedIn.
Yeah, and it's funny. So you and I've talked about this off mic as well, but it's talking about like SHRM National, right? Like, for me, SHRM represents like old guard. What's the word I want to use?
Pleated pants.
Yeah, that'll work. Old guard, pleated pants. Not in my front lawn type HR. And frankly, though, more seriously, really like the police, right, of your corporate function, right? So just like the police exist in America as like the hands of capitalism, right? So like they're here to enforce protection of white property and white people and government bodies. They're like the hands of the state. I think like that's where really like HR historically or classically has functioned. I think it's just interesting season where we're seeing like millennials and older Gen Zers, these people, like the people who have had issues with HR in their careers, and frankly, like whose worldview is just a little bit different, who are like bringing that into the HR space, which I think has there's a natural degree of contention, because historically HR just hasn't functioned as a pro-employee arm, right? Like, to your point, yes, HR exists to protect the company. The way you protect the company is to protect your company from your people. And it's like, well, that's not a really healthy or reasonable framing of anything. That's not sustainable at all. And yet that's how HR operates, right? Like, I remember when I was an HR manager at Target, I think I took I had like 8 weeks of training, and like a week and a half was spent on union busting, right? Now in Texas, we don't have unions.
Yeah.
But it was still part of the training. And it was like, here's how you spot it out, and here's what you can do, but here's the line. And so it's a lot of just like, just protecting the house. It's not really about like, hey, how do we make sure these employees have the best experience? I love also your framing around your job and your title and what you described it being experience, and how you're connecting the dots between your employee experience and your customer experience. When did that happen? Like, were you always CXO? Like, when did that,
yeah.
Say it again.
I was VP of people, then CPO, then CXO, and I've been in this seat for about a year and a half now.
Talk to me about what happened there. Like, what was the pivot between CPO and CXO?
Honestly, just an org restructure and thinking about where people made more sense within the org. We're not a ginormous company. And so just thinking through like what teams kind of align the most. And it felt like those teams, at least for me in my scope of work and my skill set, and also like my own bandwidth, kind of fell all together in a clump. And it's actually, it's been really interesting and also equally scary to step into things that are completely new to me, which I think, in some way, like, we're all kind of winging it. And so you don't ever learn new things if you're not willing to like really wing it. But that's kind of how it happened. I've been in an executive people role now for, what year is it? So almost 7 years. And so did I ever think that like I would take on things that weren't just like people, talent, culture, DEI? No. But nonetheless, I am very much enjoying that part of my role.
I mean, it's really exciting. I think like, you know, we're talking about, as you talk about like the present and future of work. I don't believe that like pure quote unquote people roles that are not connecting back to customer experience, that are not heavily depending on and pulling data, that are not clearly showing a business case for people programs, like in terms of tying back to revenue generation or risk mitigation. I don't think those roles are going to be as in demand or just in high volume in the market. And I don't think that those roles are going to pay the same as they historically have. So the fact that you're already in that space at a cannabis company is fire. So let's keep moving though, because I got some more things I wanted to talk about. You know, you and I, hold on before I get, no, I got one. Here we go. So I kind of alluded to it earlier, but like there are people online who just be talking.
Chronically online is what I like to call them. Chronically
online, just be talking. And they're talking about DEI, quote unquote, but they don't really know how anything works, because when you look at their background, like they haven't like built anything or worked anywhere, but like they have these very passionate, loud perspectives, right? Like, and you and I have been to each other about just that. Like the proliferation of opinions on organizational strategy, people strategy, DEI strategy, employee experience strategy, whatever you want to call it, despite not having like the technical bona fides. Can you give me an example of like what that looks like and why it's problematic?
Yes. So I think the toughest part about being in a people-centered role is that everyone thinks they can do a people-centered role because they've worked with people. They think they're people experts because they are people, which is in fact just not the case. And so when you see it, like there are tons of people who simply because they've managed people, they think that they understand org design. And they come on the internet and they type their little things, but it's not backed by any data. It's backed solely by personal experience, which obviously personal experience is not a great data point because it's simply your experience and it is shadowed by many things, your identity, where you worked, where you're located, what you make, blah, 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 blah. And they just come out and they're very loud about it. I think one of the funniest things that I get is like, well, you're new in DEI, so you don't get it. And I'm like, huh? Like I've been here. I've been around. I just, I look 12 in the face. So that doesn't really help my case. But people assume that because they've been in the workforce for longer than you've been in your career, that they must know more than you. Mm-hmm. But I think that's not just on the internet. That's at work too. When you, as someone who is a manager, may be younger than someone who reports to you, oftentimes they feel some type of way about that. And it's because we lived in a world where seniority